Hello everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today for a new video. I'm going to be using the new Simon Says Stamp May 2021 card kit, and I'm going to use Oxide inks to make 3 different techniques using contents from the kit. Oxide inks are one of those unique inks that I love to play with because they have unique properties that allow you to create some awesome looks that you can't quite do with other inks. Because of their pigment and dye ink combo properties, these inks allow you to do some really cool techniques. So why don't we jump on in? I'm going to start by ink blending. I think we all know how to do ink blending now, but I wanted to go ahead and show you the color combinations that I'm using for this card. I'm going to start off with dried marigold as the first color, and then I'll blend that into some wild honey. You'll also notice I'm working on a Tonic Studios matte. This is a really nice slick surface that's perfect for ink blending, and it also happens to be magnetic, so I can hold my paper down as I'm working with my ink blending. Another really cool feature about this matte is that I can rotate it as I work, so that way I can easily maneuver the paper into the position that I need it to be while I'm working. So in this case, because I'm right-handed and I wanted to work from the right-hand side of my panel, I just rotated it so that this side of the panel was now on my right. I'm using Ripe Persimmon to go ahead and blend through to Wild Honey, and then the final color will be Dusty Concord, and this blends really nicely with Ripe Persimmon. If you tried to blend Wild Honey and Dusty Concord together, you get more of a brown, so the Ripe Persimmon is a nice transitional color between the Wild Honey and the purple. So now that I have this background finished, we're going to make one more. This one is a combination of dried marigold, wild honey, ripe persimmon, and this time broken china. Broken china and ripe persimmon do create more of a little bit of a brownish tone, but for this particular card, I wanted that. I was really inspired by the papers that are in this kit because they have some really unique color combinations in them. And this is what actually inspired me to do this particular color combo because I loved the transition between the blue and the orange. So here are my 2 backgrounds. They're completely blended and ready to add some splatters onto. Now you don't have to do this, but I love adding texture to my backgrounds. It provides a little bit of interest, so I always like to add a little bit of splattering. This will dry really nicely even though this is just plain white cardstock. I've cut one of the panels, which I'll actually end up cutting the other one too, into a mini slimline card panel. This is going to be the background for some die cuts. This card is the easiest of all of them, and that's why I wanted to start with this one first. I'm cutting some lemon chiffon cardstock to be able to die cut with using the dandelion die that's in the kit. This is a really cute die, and I left it in the negative portion of the die cup so that way I could ink blend a little bit of wild honey around the edges. This was really helpful in holding the die in place while I added the blending on top, and now I could just pop it out of the negative. This will create a nice little bit of dimension for these dandelions. There's going to be 3 of them on my card, and I'm going to pop them up off of this panel so that way I know exactly where I want to stamp my sentiment. Even though these are popped up with foam tape, I will still be able to stamp my sentiment because my MISTI tool has enough room in it for this 1 layer depth of foam tape. And so then once I glued all of my dandelions in place, I flipped this panel over and trimmed down the stems so that way they were flush with the edge of my card. I will use a little dot of liquid glue to hold those stems down onto the card just because I didn't want them to get bent as I put this in my envelope. So the sentiment I'm using is from the Dandelion Messages stamp set, and one of the other unique properties about Distress Oxide inks is because they are pigment based as well as dye, you can stamp on top of an already blended background and get a beautiful crisp impression that's going to stay nice and vibrant even after it dries. So now that I have my sentiment stamped along the top, which was with Dusty Concord ink, I'm pulling out some, believe it or not, buttons. In the kit, you get 2 buttons from Tim Holtz, and they were so pretty I couldn't bear to use them on this card. Plus, I needed 3 for this particular project because I was putting a button over top of each of the dandelions. So I just pulled out some yellow buttons that I had in my stash, and I glued these down on top of the dandelions. These embellish them beautifully. And it's funny because we kind of forget how popular buttons were a long time ago, and being able to use them on a project just goes to show you how even though a trend may be past, something can still create a beautiful, in this case, embellishment on your card project. So I'm going to save those 2 Tim Holtz buttons for something else. And on the background of this card, I'm going to go ahead and add a few dots of white gel pen for just a little bit of a magical sparkle, and it really helps tie in that texture that we have on the background from the water splatters. So this card is done, and we're ready to move on to our second project. So remember the other background that we created with the ink blending? Well, we're going to use that one now to go ahead and stamp on top of. Just like we did with the sentiment, we're going to have this Distress Oxide ink be the stamping for this background. I'm going to stamp 3 times to get a really nice dark impression. It's one of the really great features about the Misty is I can stamp over and over until I get the intensity that I want for my stamping. I did feel like I needed one more dandelion along the bottom portion of this panel, so I am going to bring in one of the single dandelions from the stamp set and stamp that 3 times onto my background too. As you can see, I've already trimmed down this panel to be a slimline card size. One of the other cool features about Oxide inks is their reactive properties. So here I'm pulling out a raindrop stencil from Simon Says Stamp and some of the Hello Yellow Glitz Glitter Gel that's in the kit. Now I know this is messy, but I'm going to use my finger to carefully apply a super thin layer of paste through the stencil. When I remove the stencil, you'll see how this paste is kind of almost translucent. You can't really see it too well unless it catches the light, and when it does, it's magnificent. It really captures all the colors that are in the background and provides a really magical feel to the rain. I'm going to pair this with an encouraging sentiment that I'm going to stamp onto slate gray cardstock with embossing ink. I'll use some white embossing powder to add on top of that ink, and then I'll heat set this with my heat tool to get a really beautiful embossed greeting. Once I have this embossed, I will take a sentiment labels die from Simon Says Stamp to trim this down a little bit so that way I know the approximate size of how I want my square for the sentiment. Once I have the height down, then I can trim down the sides with some scissors to be able to get the width that I want. This sentiment I'm going to pop up along the left-hand corner of my card with foam tape, and that's going to complete this card. Those magical raindrops look amazing over top of this ink blending and the stamping that we've done with the Distress Oxide inks. It really captures those other colors and creates new colors in between, even as this catches the light. It's very hard to capture in the photos. In person, this card is just gorgeous. Alright, so our final technique is to use the embossing folder that's in your kit with your Oxide inks. We're going to create a faux letterpress effect. Now, I found the best way I love to add ink onto my embossing folder is to ink blend it, believe it or not. So I'm using similar colors to what I've been using throughout my other projects, and I'm going to blend those colors on top of the embossing folder. This is the side that is debossed. This is the side that's going to get pressed down into the paper, and it's all going to have some nice dimension. So this is the side that's going to have color. I'm transitioning the colors as best I can, so I'll blend them so that way there's no harsh lines, and we're going to have a really nice color combination going across this whole entire embossing folder. This is the carrier for our paper, so we're going to go ahead and stick a piece of white cardstock inside here, so that way then we can run this through our die cut machine. I'll carefully close this, put this through my die cut machine using the sandwich for embossing folders, and then voila! Check out how gorgeous this is and how unique of a color combination we get because we did that ink blending. This is really easy to clean. I'm just going to take a dry cloth and buff off all of that ink. If you have some spots that didn't quite clean up totally, you could just use a little bit of water because Oxide inks, of course, clean up easily with water. Now we're going to intensify that ink color that we have here by adding some very light blending to this background. I'm not going heavy with this because I want the original colors to still show through, and I love how this looks. So I used, again, Dusty Concord, Ripe Persimmon, Wild Honey, and of course dried marigold. And I'm being very, very light as I add this ink down. I'm doing this as light as I can to make sure that none of those other colors that are underneath get too disturbed. I still want those original colors to be showing through. So now that our blending is done, I've trimmed this panel down just a little bit, and we're going to adhere this down onto some of the rose gold cardstock that's in the kit. This is a little bit of a frame around my background. And then my sentiment, I'm going to also stamp on that slate gray cardstock that I used for the first card. And again, we'll also do some white embossing powder for the greeting. I felt like the white really popped off of the gray nicely. And then, of course, all of that pops off of our cards, which have a lot of beautiful color. All right, so once I had my sentiment embossed, I will take my fine tip scissors and fussy cut this out. You could have cut this into just a banner shape if you wanted, but I like being able to have it close up to the edge of a greeting like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim this down with my scissors. This will get popped up off of my card, but one of the things I needed to do before finishing up my sentiment was to add a little bit of sparkle on top of this background. I have a little dauber here. It's like almost like a Q-tip dauber. I don't remember where I got this, but I'm using this to apply some paste very gently over top of my dandelions. I'm using a very light touch, creating just a little hint of glimmer here and there, and it's going to catch the light beautifully. It makes the dandelions look like they're sparkling in the sunset. Here's where I took some foam tape and attached this down onto my card. I'm using a white A2 card base for the finished card size, and that's pretty much it. The final finishing touch was to add a few sequins, of course. I love adding sequins whenever I can, especially some clear sequins. So these are Simon Says Stamp Moonshine sequins. I'm gluing these down with some glossy accents because, of course, that'll dry nice and clear. And that is going to complete my card. Here you can see that beautiful sparkle as the sun catches those dandelions in the light. I love how all 3 of these cards turned out. They all capture some great oxide ink techniques and use so many of the new products that are in the May 2021 card kit from Simon Says Stamp, which is Dandelion Messages. This kit is now available, so if you're interested in getting the kit, be sure to check out the links below in the video description. This kit also has a subscription available if you would like to be able to subscribe to Simon's kits. They are a no obligation monthly kit, so when you get your invoice for the month of whatever kit is coming out, that particular invoice, if you don't pay it, you will not be charged a cancellation fee or anything like that. You'll be given the opportunity to subscribe to the following kit, and it's a really nice service. And it also, of course, gives you a discount off of the retail price of the kit. So if you're interested in any of that, I have it all linked below in the video description. Be sure to check out my blog because I have still pictures of all the cards that I used today over there. You can also subscribe to my channel, and please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed. I'll be back soon with more to share, but until next time, I hope you all have a very wonderful day. Bye!